Good morning. Welcome to the Terry Leadership Speaker Series. My name is Melissa McDonald, and I'm a marketing major in the senior class of Leonard Leadership Scholars. This event is presented by the Institute for Leadership Advancement, and this happens to be the final TLSS of this year. The Institute for Leadership Advancement in the Terry College of Business develops values-based, impact-driven leaders who serve their communities and organizations. ILA instills leadership capabilities layered on top of the student's academic major that promotes self-development, effective communication, teamwork, innovation, and adaptability in a changing global environment. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Ms. Debbie Storey, the Executive Vice President of Mobility Customer Service at AT&T Mobility. In her role as Executive Vice President, Ms. Storey oversees customer care for all business and consumer AT&T Mobility customers, including advanced technical and digital support and social media. Ms. Storey joined the company in 1983 and has held several leadership roles since. In 2005, she served as a vice president and played a crucial role in the company's transformation from voice to broadband services and helped lead the $67 billion AT&T Bell South merger. Ms. Storey then served as Vice President of Sales and later as the Senior Vice President of AT&T Consumer and Consumer Center Support. Prior to her current role, Ms. Storey served as AT&T's Senior Vice President of Talent Development and Chief Diversity Officer for nearly 4 years, where she was responsible for identifying and developing leaders and aligning them with the company's vision. Ms. Storey is a proud double dog, as she holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in psychology with a criminal justice minor from the University of Georgia, as well as a Master's of Business Administration degree from UGA's Terry College of Business. She is a graduate of the Leadership Atlanta class of 2008 and is involved in the Terry College through the Terry Dean's Advisory Council and the Terry Alumni Board. She also serves on the AT&T Performing Arts Center Board, the Baylor Healthcare System Advisory Board, and the National Association of Corporate Directors North Texas Chapter Board. She and her husband, Dr. Jay Mabrey, live in Dallas, and we are very fortunate to have her back in Athens with us today. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Debbie Storey.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Derek Hammock, and I'm a Leonard Leadership Scholar from the class of 2015, earning my master's in accounting. I'm pleased to welcome you today to the Terry Leadership Speaker Series with Ms. Debbie Storey, and I'm looking forward to facilitating this event. Debbie, thank you for being here. It's really an honor to have you. I want to start off by having you share your story. In learning more about you, I discovered a common theme, and that is that you dared to imagine all the things that your life has to offer you. And that gave you the confidence and the motivation to succeed in corporate America. Can you talk a little bit about that theme and your leadership journey?
Absolutely. So first, let me say how honored I am to be here. I love any excuse to get back to this beautiful campus. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you all today. And I have to tell you, being in this chapel brings back some wonderful memories. The last time I was here, I was at that podium. It was the graduation of my executive MBA, and I gave the graduation speech. So right now, I feel this strange, compelling urge to start quoting Dr. Seuss, but I won't do that. So, any discussion of my leadership journey has to start with what inspired me very early in my career. So I was living in Atlanta, and I had just started working really in corporate America. And when I was in Atlanta, I had the opportunity to attend a lot of events like this, where I got to see a lot of really great leaders, people I knew as leaders in businesses in the city of Atlanta. And I had the opportunity to go listen to them. And I would sit in the audience, just like you all are today, and I would hear them up on stage, and I would just listen to them and soak up every word of advice. They talked about their career stories, they talked about their journeys, their tips, their words of wisdom. You know, to me, these were the people who had really made it. And I couldn't imagine that I could ever get to where they were, but I wanted to imagine it. And hearing them speak and talk about the practical things that you can do to succeed and advance within a company gave me the confidence that I too could be like them, that I too could follow the path that they had set and one day be on a stage like that. And what's interesting now looking back on that is when I think about my own leadership journey, I realize that the people that I was watching on that stage are absolutely no different from me. They're no different from you. They're no different from any one of you all in this audience today. They're not special. They weren't lucky people. They weren't given things. They earned everything they got, and what made them a little bit different is that they had a dream, and they dared to imagine that they could achieve that dream. And they had the perseverance, the confidence, the courage to pursue their dream and to not let anything stand in their way. And so it was inspiring to me early on. It's what gave me confidence. But as I look back, I realize we all have the opportunity to do exactly the same thing. If you just have the courage to dare to imagine and take the steps necessary to get where you want to be.
Great. I think that's something that we all, know that we can do that as well, just like you have. And now looking at your career at AT&T, how do you feel that you have added value over your career and continue to today as an executive vice president with the company?
So one of the things that gets me up every day is that I'm driven to have an impact on people. And when I think about leadership and leadership styles, I look back on my career and I realize the thing that made me most successful was that every single day I got up not to impress somebody above me, not to make a big name for myself, but every day I got up and came into work determined to help the people in whose care I was charged with and help make them successful. And one of the lessons I've learned as I look back over my career is I always think of it in terms of, this is one of the things I think they ought to teach in business school maybe, is I think of it in terms of alchemy. And to me, alchemy is the beautiful thing that happens when human beings engage and connect. And I think when I look back, that's what has happened over my entire career. I've been fortunate enough to figure out the ways to get the people I was responsible for to connect in amazing ways, to engage, to rally around a vision, and then to walk through walls to do things that they never thought possible.
Thank you. Now I want to turn to the dark side of leadership, and that topic is failure. We often learn and grow the most through failing the first time. And so can you talk about a key failure over your career that grew you into becoming a better person and business leader?
It's hard to pick just one because I've had, so first of all, let me say this. I think a career without failure is a career played way too safe and played from the sidelines. And so as you all think about your careers, I hope you accept and understand the fact that in order to really make a difference, you have to take risks, and with risk comes certain failure. But failure is not a life sentence. Failure is a lesson. And real failure is when you fall down, staying down. And the success is getting back up and learning from those failures and moving forward. So when I think about, I have had a couple of huge public failures actually in my career. I'll talk about one of them very early in my career. So I worked for a printing company. It was called Stevens Graphics, and we printed telephone directories for Bell South and other publishing companies around the country. How many of you all even have a telephone directory in your house right now? Sadly, but hopefully you've got them on your devices. So, but yet those were the days that that was a completely manual process. And so early in my career as a customer service representative, my job was to take the instructions from the customer and put a set of instructions together for the manufacturing facility as to how the book should come together. Mm-hmm. And the manufacturing facility relied 100% on those instructions that came from me. And it was my very first directory that I was in charge of, and so I had worked very hard to put all the instructions together and delivered them to the manufacturing plant. And fortunately, I was just excited enough about what I had accomplished with my first telephone directory that I walked out to the manufacturing floor to see the first copies coming off of the assembly line. And this is millions and millions of dollars worth of paper that are flowing through millions of dollars worth of equipment. So I run out there, I pull my telephone directory off of the line, and I realize the A's are not in the front of the book, they're in the back of the book. The book is being put together wrong. And my heart jumped into my throat, and I thought, what do I do? How do I get out of this? How do I save face here? And the first thing I thought is, mistakes only get worse with age. The first thing I have to do is shut down the press. I didn't even have the authority to do it, but I went to the guy leading the press, and I said, it's wrong, you have to shut it down. Trust me, I will go get the right approval, but stop printing because millions of dollars are flowing out the back end here. It was an early lesson, right? Everybody was watching. It was my first job as a customer service representative. My boss, I knew I'd let him down, but I went right to my boss and I said, look, I made a huge mistake, and One of the things I failed to do, in my exuberance in this new job and my determination to show everybody I knew what I was doing, I didn't get help, right? I did it all by myself. I didn't get anybody to check my work, and the consequence was a really big mistake on the back end. So I actually, admitted it to my boss. We fixed everything, but I took the step to say to my boss, not only will I never let this happen again, but I've put a new process in place that will ensure that nobody ever can make this mistake again.
You say that you've had more than one failure, but I think it's obvious today that you've had many more successes than you have failures.
Thank you.
Now I want to look to a brighter side away from failure, and that is leading through your values. We in the Institute for Leadership Advancement focus a lot on values-based leadership. Can you talk about two of your values and how you lead from them?
So I'd say two of my really core values in leadership are humility and authenticity. I'll talk about humility first. So one of the bits of advice I give to everyone is, especially people like you in this room, you all are really incredibly bright, talented, quick, sharp, perceptive people. When you get out into the working world, never make the mistake of thinking that it's all about you. And because it never is. Nobody ever succeeds alone. Any leader that you ever see sitting up on this stage and have the opportunity to hear from, they'll tell you the same thing, that they didn't do it on their own. They were smart enough to surround themselves with people who were smarter than they were. And so it's a lesson, as I look back, it's a lesson that I was lucky enough. It's not really a lesson that I didn't know how to do the right things at the time that I was, coming up in my career. But as I look back, I have the opportunity to see the things I did well and the things that I didn't do well, so I know what works. And that's one of them, is that I always surrounded myself with people who are smarter than me. Over the years, I've had a lot of people come to me for career advice, and they say, I'm really uncomfortable because I've got this really smart team, and what if they work me out of a job? And I always say, it just makes you look good. Why would you not want to do that? You need to deliver results for this business, and surrounding yourself with smart people is the smartest way to do that. So humility, I think of that as you always have to set your own personal ego aside for the collective ego of the group or the organization. It can never be about you. And then authenticity is something that I love to talk about because I think this is a lesson, I think it's always been a core value of mine, but I've only realized in the last part of, the last number of years of my career how important this is to people when you're leading people. So I have 33,000 employees that I lead at AT&T. And authenticity is about being open and honest and being an individual in who you are. And I have a lot of people come to talk to me for career advice who ask about, I feel like I'm walking this balance of trying to fit into a mold versus trying to be me. And I love that conversation because it gives me an opportunity to talk about never ever give up who you are. You are an individual, and the best people, the most successful people, bring that individuality with them to the workplace and into everything they do. However, you have to evolve, right? Your style, your leadership style, will absolutely evolve over the course of your career. That doesn't mean you're giving up your individuality in the process. You also have to be relatable. I have people come and talk with me who say, we have people even at AT&T who are a bit quirky, right? They have their own unique styles. Maybe they dress really funky, and they come and talk to me because they have angst about, I'm being told I need to tone it down, but this is me. I'm being an individual. And I say to them, it's an interest, people wrestle with that. And I say to them, you can't let your appearance be a distraction and keep people from seeing your real capabilities. That's really what it's all about, right? So you have to be relatable. You have to be able to communicate in a style that people understand, depending on the audience that you're talking to, whether it's your boss, your coworkers, the people that you lead. You have to be able to have people focus on what you're saying, the message you're trying to convey, and what you know and what you're delivering, and not be distracted by constantly saying, wow, her skirt is just so short. Really, so does that make sense? And yes. So authenticity, when leading a big organization like the 33,000 employees that I lead now, nothing makes more of a difference for people than straight, honest communication. I learned it really early in my career. At one point in my career, I was taking over what at that time was a big organization. It was about 400 people that I was now going to be leading. I was their brand new leader, and just before I was announced as their leader, a major reorganization had been announced, and a lot of their jobs were going away. Huge number, about 30% of their jobs were moving from Atlanta, where I was at the time, and they were moving out into, to be co-located with our field around the 9 southeast states. And the HR people, I had a big town hall just like this, and all of my employees were in the room, and they had just been told that many of them wouldn't have their jobs, and they didn't know which ones. And so my human resources person at the time said, look, this is your first time addressing your new team. We just want you to just, get up there, tell them hi, say who you are, and, then turn it over to HR. And HR is going to walk them through, what's happening to them. And I went, are you kidding me? That feels so wrong. Like, I'm their new leader. I need to acknowledge what's happening to these people. I need to talk with them about their fate and their future. And so, I got up unprepared and talked with them. First of all, I told them the rationale. Nobody had told them why jobs were going away and moving out into the field. So I talked about the business, and I talked about why it was necessary to get these people were artists, and get them out closer to the salespeople in the field so that we could do a better job, be closer to the customer, and do a better job serving our customers. So first of all, they understood why what was happening to them was happening, why the decision had been made. And then I said, very honestly and authentically, this must be one of the hardest things that all of you have ever faced in your career, and I get that. I have never been in the position of being told my job is going away. I can't even imagine how you feel right now. But I want to tell you that I have huge compassion for what you're going through, and I also want to give you my commitment that as we work through this process, we will do everything possible to work through this as humanely as we can, and to take care of every one of you and either help you find a job out in the field somewhere or help you figure out what your next step is internally. And it was a huge lesson to me because that team would have followed me anywhere from that moment, and I was their brand new leader. All they wanted, what they need, what any team needs is just straight talk. And they need an opportunity to hear the truth, to hear rationale, and then have an opportunity to vent, because sometimes we just need to vent about the things that are happening to us. So I have, for my entire career, been one of those, I say what you mean and mean what you say. Just shoot straight and be authentic. Just be who you are. I'll tell you one other quick story, because I think this is such an important point. I see leaders who are individuals doing a great job, so well respected in the roles that they have throughout the corporation. And then all of a sudden I see them get promoted to this sort of high level, and all of a sudden they change, because they go, wow, I've got to be a different image now. Something different is expected to me, and now I have to be more corporate-like and more executive-like. And it's failure, right? I see them then stand on stage and try to be that person, and I think it's not working, right? And most of the time, individuals in that position realize it. They come back down to just stay grounded in who they are, and it works so much better. People just want to see realness and quirkiness, and I always say the real you is always 100% better than the fake you, right?
Thanks so much for that.
Yep.
This next topic I want to go into is one that we've all thought about at some point or another, and we will experience it before long, and I know you've been through it, and that's work-life balance. Does it exist? And how can you find balance when you're striving for the very best in both your personal and professional ambitions?
Clearly nobody's interested in the answer to this question. Yeah, so this is a challenging one. So I think the term work-life balance needs to go away, because work-life balance refers to a time when we didn't have devices and they weren't always on. In the days when I had 2 phones and 2 phone numbers, one was sitting on my desk, connected with a wire to the wall, and one was at my house connected with a wire to the wall. You had work-life balance, because the only way for someone to get in touch with you when you left the office was to call that home phone, and that was a big deal, right? That had to be an emergency. And you weren't connected by any kind of, internet, electronic media. You just had the time to disconnect from work and go home. Those days are past, and really, thank goodness, right? We all walk around. I saw all of you guys with your heads down before we got started this morning. We all walk around fully connected, and when you're in the working world, It's a good thing, but it's a challenging thing that you are always, in fact, on and connected. And work now the pace of work happens around the clock. It doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. And so I think we ought to eliminate the term work-life balance, and I think it's about work-life integration. And I think work-life integration is 100% a personal accomplishment. I think the way that you integrate your work and your life has to be the way you craft it. And the first thing I would say about this is you probably experience it now. You all probably don't feel like you have a lot of work-life balance, but gets more challenging in the workforce. But the way I like to think about this is you are juggling a lot of balls. And when you go to work in a business environment, you're constantly juggling so many balls. The way you need to think about it is some of those balls are rubber, and if you drop them, they will bounce. Somebody else will pick them up, or they'll bounce for a little while and you can pick them up. Some of those balls are crystal, and if they drop, you can't pick them up. They don't bounce, they break. And so when you think about work-life integration, I think it's about staying focused on those balls that are crystal. I think of those as your values, the things that are important to you. You always have to stay grounded on those. And those you don't make trade-offs on. And so as you go through your career, I think it has to be a series of trade-offs. I could give you lots of examples from my own career, but there have to be times when you go, I've just gotten a big opportunity, a big promotion. You know, if you have children, a family, you need to make the decision with your family, but you go home to your family and say, this is a big opportunity, but it's going to take me away from you all for a little while. How do we make that happen together? And you figure out how to make that work. You get help, you hire help, you rely on family members. But you can't do that so long that crystal ball falls and breaks. And then there comes a time when you have to make the other trade-off, and you have to say, in the work environment, this is a time in my life when I need to focus on family, whatever it is that's important to you. And you have an honest conversation. I'll give you an example from my career about when I did this. So early in my career, I was still working for the printing company, and I'd been promoted really quickly up through the ranks of the organization, and I now found myself sitting at the president's table, and printing company was completely male-dominated anyway, but in those days, business environments were largely male-dominated. So I was the only female in management at the time in my company. So I'm sitting at the table, and I had a 5-year-old son at the time, and I was a single mom. And so every day, this was a 24/7 manufacturing operation, so every day at 4 o'clock there was a meeting of the whole senior team where we'd talk about how did manufacturing operations go today, what's happening tonight on the second and third shift, and it was a planning session. And every day as we approached 5 o'clock and the meeting was supposed to be over, there wasn't anyone else in that room who cared if the meeting ended at 5, right? In fact, in those days, people liked to hang around the office and, chat and read the paper before they went home. I was the only one that cared, and as every single day, as the clock approached 5 o'clock, I started to sweat, and I started to go through the decision process in my head because I had to get to my daycare center to pick my son up by 6. Remember, we didn't have devices then, so I couldn't text someone from the room under the table, and so I had to make the decision. I'd say to myself, well, does it seem like the meeting is going to end in the next 20 minutes? Because if it does, then I can get up, I can run, I can make it till the daycare center. Or do I just sit here anyway, and if the meeting doesn't end on time, do I just make myself really conspicuous and stay indifferent and run out of the meeting and tell everybody I have to go? Or do I just excuse myself right now and try and make a phone call and call somebody to pick up my son? It was this horrible thing I wrestled with every single day at 5 o'clock. And far too many days I got to the daycare center and my son was sitting on the front steps, with the daycare center leader holding his hand, and I said, this isn't going to work. I can't keep doing this. So I sat down with my boss and had a conversation, and this was, sort of risky in those days because as I said, there weren't many women in the workplace. And I sat down with him and I explained my situation. I said, every day that meeting, every day it doesn't end at 5, I wrestle with being able to go get my son. So I'd like to ask you to do a couple things for me. Number one, if you could just tell me in advance, any day that you need that meeting to run over, just tell me in advance, because I can then make arrangements for someone else to pick up my son, and everything will be fine. I can stay as late as you need me to. And I said, but if the meeting doesn't have to go on past 5, if it's really an hour-long meeting and we're done, can you excuse the meeting so that it's not obvious that I have to get up and leave, right? And just, if anyone else wants to stay and talk, if we could move it to a different setting so it's not obvious that we're ending the meeting so that I can leave. And the other thing I said is, I'm a single mom, I will stay any night. So 4 nights a week, we have to stay late and work. I'm happy to be the one to do that. Just let me know and I can make those arrangements. But can you give me my weekends with my son and not have me be the one that has to come in on the weekends on off shifts and find something to do with my son? And he said, I get it. What I didn't do is give him a problem for him to solve, right? What I did do is give him some options that were completely reasonable and workable for both of us. And from that day forward, every day, he rarely ever said, I need you to stay after 5. From that day forward, he ended every meeting at 5 o'clock. And my peers around the room, who were all men, I saw the light bulbs come on for them as well, which made me so proud. They realized what was going on, right, without anybody having to call me out as being different. And they started to say, wow, I might have some women on my team who have similar challenges, and I need to be focused on doing the same thing for them. So work-life balance is possible. You have to make those decisions and those trade-offs, but you also have to set boundaries when it's time to set boundaries.
Right. I think that makes us all feel a little bit better. Makes me feel better about it. I want you to step back and look towards the very beginning of your career. And as we as students, we're preparing to enter the workforce, whether it's in business, law, healthcare, and others, what advice do you have for early success as a young professional?
So when I look back, again, my hindsight can be your foresight. I'll tell you 3 things that I did early in my career that were absolutely critical to my early success and quick advancement early in my career. Number 1, and this is my advice based on my experience. Number 1, make great coffee. I'll tell you the story. Number 2, relationships matter. That's when alchemy happens. And number 3, default to yes. That's my advice. And let me tell you quickly about each one of those. I graduated from the University of Georgia, as Melissa said, and I had a degree in psychology, minor in criminal justice. I had worked my way through college in a restaurant corporation. I was a vice president of a restaurant corporation, which really just meant that I collected money from 6 restaurants, but if I got to a restaurant and a dishwasher hadn't showed up, I also washed dishes, so it wasn't very glamorous. So I was ready to start my career in corporate America, and I didn't know what I wanted to, I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to do or what company I wanted to work for. I really wanted to interview for a boss, and that's the way I approached my first job. I interviewed in a lot of different industries with a lot of different companies, but I was looking for a boss because I wanted to start at the ground level and work my way up. I wanted to learn everything from the ground level. I didn't want to bluff my way into a management position. But I wanted a place where I thought they shared my values, understood the importance of work-life balance at the time, and someone who would commit to me that if I could work hard and demonstrate potential, they'd give me the opportunity to advance. And that was Paul Hollinger, 33 and a half years ago, and so I went to work for him as a clerk in a customer service department of the printing company that I talked about. So I'm very excited about starting my first job in corporate America, and I'm pretty darn qualified, and I get to work that first day. I'm so eager. I sit down with Paul Hollinger, and I go, I'm so excited to get started. What's my job? And he goes, well, we've never actually had a clerk before, so why don't you start by making coffee? And I had this, oh no moment, like what have I done? But I said, and by the way, I didn't even drink coffee or know the apparatus required to make it. So, but I said, you know what, if that's my first job, that's okay. I'm gonna make the best coffee anybody's ever made. So I go to JCPenney, I get them to tell me what I need to make coffee, and I come to work and get it all set up. But I didn't stop by just making coffee. I went, okay, if this is my job and they're trying to figure out what I can do and I thought, this is a great opportunity to get to know people in this business. So every day I came in, I made the coffee, and every day I targeted another individual that I was going to go deliver coffee to and take that opportunity to sit down and talk with them. And so I started sitting down with my peers, my colleagues, my superiors, and I'd say, as I deliver their coffee, morning, everybody's okay, I brought their coffee, how can they not have a career discussion with me, right? So I'd sit down with them, get to know them, I'd say, tell me about your career journey, what do you do here? And it didn't take long before I was saying to people, yesterday I was talking to Melissa, And Melissa's doing something that's really similar to what you're doing. I wonder if you two should get together and make sure that you're not duplicating work. Let me do that for you. Let me figure that out for you. And so I started by making coffee, but I looked around for where I could add value, and people started to see that value. And 6 months after I started, I was promoted to a customer service representative. 6 months after that, I was supervising the department. And so the Make Great Coffee story is all about, and I've seen it over the course of my career, see it with people who work for me. Never ever be the person that says, not my job, or that's beneath me. Never ever do that. If you want to be the go-to person, you want to earn the right to take on more responsibility, make great coffee or copies or whatever it is that's asked of you, because that says they're the go-to guy, I can trust them, I know they're going to deliver, and I'm going to give them more and more and more. So that's the first story. Second one is relationships matter. As I was delivering coffee, there was most of the people there were, that worked at the company were, early middle of their career, but there was one gentleman named Buster Horn, and Buster had been there for 44 years at Stevens Graphics. His whole career was at Stevens Graphics. And so most of the people around me sort of dismissed him as, he's sort of past his prime. He doesn't even know the technology today. He started 44 years ago. Technology's evolved so much. He's really not in the thick of things. He's not that important. I found him fascinating, and I soaked up so much knowledge from him. And he taught me about relationships, not overtly, but as I look back, in two ways. One, Buster was sort of, at this point, sort of a nice relationship guy responsible for the relationships with our customer. But he wasn't the point person, right? Work didn't go through him. But when the first time I saw a big customer have a big problem, they didn't call their account rep, they called Buster Horn. And Buster Horn was always 2 phone calls away from an answer, a solution, a fix. Buster, because of his he didn't know how to, he couldn't go fix it himself, but he had built relationships over all those years that allowed him to accomplish absolutely anything immediately, and people trusted that. And the second aspect of relationships matter that I learned from Buster is that many years after Buster was retired, I learned that in those days you didn't even, the word sponsor didn't exist, or champion, those words didn't exist. But I learned many years later that Buster was my champion and my sponsor. When I was, had just started with the business, he was the one who constantly was sitting at the table, the leadership table, saying, what about Debbie for this job? What about Debbie? Give Debbie a shot. Give Debbie a chance. And it might not have been the first time he brought it up or even the 10th time, but eventually people said, we trust him. He keeps saying she's qualified, she can do this. Let's give her a chance. He was my sponsor. So there's a lot of lessons in there. Never underestimate the value of the relationships that you form with the people around you. And then default TS, I'll talk about quickly. Again, fairly early in my career, I had now been promoted. I was managing the customer service organization for the printing company, and the president of the company came to me and said, we want you to take over sales. I went, take over sales? Are you kidding me? The sales department was all men, of course, who had been selling printing for 35 years or more. I had never been in sales, never, and I certainly hadn't been in sales in the printing company. I said, how can I do that? So I didn't say that to the president, right? I was smart enough to, keep my decorum and say all the right things to the president and said, let me think about that. Very honored, let me think about it. And I went home saying, I have to say no. I'm not qualified for this. I have to say no. I can't do this. And I was smart enough to call Buster Horn before I said no, and I said, Buster, help me through this, right? So what's the best way? It's very flattering, but what's the best way for me to say no and position this in a way that doesn't hurt my career? And he said, why are you going to say no? And why are you hesitating? And I said, because I'm not qualified. I haven't done this yet. And he said, do you think that the president's asking you to do this because you are an expert in sales? Do you think he doesn't know that? And I said, well, no, he obviously knows that. And he said, that's not why he's offering you this position. He's offering you this position because of your leadership capabilities. And so we talked for a few more minutes, and I said, but what if I fail? What if this is something that I step into because it's so new and I can't do? And he said, if you want to grow, you have to get out of your comfort zone, because growth and comfort do not peacefully coexist. And the other thing he said to me is, and I've got your back. And that was probably the most important thing he said to me. So I've seen that story play out over and over again through my career and through other people's careers. Default to yes, and then figure it out. But before you default to yes, go back to tip number 2, which is relationships matter, and you better have relationships with people who are going to support you and have your back as you step into those new opportunities.
Great. Thank you so much for answering my questions. I now want to turn it over to the audience for a few questions. Yes.
Hey, my name is Eli Yarbrough. I'm in the class of 2017 for the Leonard Leader Scholars and a finance and accounting student. I'm interested to hear you talk about, we've had some leaders come in here and basically be able to share lessons or values that were instilled in them by their family or their guardians. I'd just be interested to hear from you, were there any lessons or values that were instilled in you from an early age that you believe have been able to carry you through both your personal life and your career?
Yes. The person who was most influential in my early life was my mom. And so my dad was a Cornell graduate, Harvard Business School, so, highly educated, capable man. My mom was an Army nurse and, quite an adventurous. She had such a love of life and people. And, at 19 years old, got on a boat with her car, to Germany to go be an Army nurse. I mean, she was just that kind of, adventurous spirit. And my dad worked for large oil companies. They were moving him around the country for a long time, once my mom and dad met and had married, obviously. And then eventually they moved us to Atlanta. And then after about 18 months in Atlanta, they said, your next job is, Cleveland, Ohio. And my dad said, not anymore. I had 3 siblings, so 4 of us, and my dad said, we're not going to keep moving. So at that point in his career, he became an entrepreneur. And you'd think Cornell, Harvard Business School, he would have been the brains of the business. But my mom was the brains of every business that they had over the course of many, many years of his career. She was the finance person. She kept the book. She was much smarter about how to do business, give discounts, get new customers, create loyal customers than my dad was. Didn't take book smarts. It took, intelligence. She was also the customer relations person, so everybody wanted to do business with them because of my mom. But so I learned early on about strength, and that it doesn't necessarily just come from innate intelligence. It comes from what I call the broader intelligence, which is understanding the world around you, making connections, and using those to do good things. But a lesson my mom taught me, my niece Megan Toomey is here with me today. She's 15, and we were talking about this story on the way up in the car from Atlanta last night. My dad, through the years of being an entrepreneur, some of you will be entrepreneurs, and you'll have good years and you'll have down years. And one of the years that was a down year that we weren't making much money, and he was in the process of selling a company, didn't know the next company he was going to buy. And so things were tight at home. And my mom said, and I was in high school, and my mom said, you and I need to go get a job. We're going to go to work at McDonald's together. And you all can imagine how mortifying that was to me. And, but we went to work at McDonald's together. And every time one of my high school friends came into the McDonald's, I zipped behind the fry machine, right? And I was hiding behind the fry machine until my friends would leave. And, my mom, this huge zest for life, smartest little cookie in the world, one day I came out from behind the fry machine, and she said, what are you doing? Get over yourself. Do you think anybody really cares? Just do what you have to do, and let's have fun doing it. And it was such an early lesson for me in what a beautiful, fantastically smart woman. She didn't care that people saw her. She was just doing what she had to do, and she was having fun at doing it. So really early lesson. Good question. Thanks, Eli.
We have time for one more. All right, well, I have one more if no one else does. I was going to get to it. When you are hiring, what is the number one quality you look for in a candidate?
That's a trick question because there's not really one. So I'll say quickly, there are foundational things that are table stakes. And then I'll talk about what I think is the one trait and quality that makes a candidate stand out and that really determines success or failure. There are so many, you can read articles every day about the things that hiring managers or companies look for, but I think of it in terms of the 3 N's. It's intelligence, intensity, and integrity, right? And I could talk about each one of those for a while. Intelligence is not just book smarts, it's how you put pieces together, how you receive the world and constantly learn. Intensity is about work is hard. Are you willing to put in the hours when it's required and push through walls to make things happen? And then integrity speaks for itself. So I think those are foundational, right? But table stakes that everyone has to have. But then I think the key attribute is attitude. And I would also characterize that, I'd further hone that down by talking about resilience. And the life really is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond and react to it. And you control, your attitude controls how you respond and react to it. And that's what resilience is all about. And there are lots and lots of studies that show that the best leaders, the leaders that you would know, leaders who were here, when you read about Pete Carell's story, for goodness sakes, he's faced a tremendous amount of adversity in his life and overcome that. So most good leaders have faced a lot of adversity in their lives. I personally am a cancer survivor, 16 years, was hit with thank you. So, and 5 years ago, I lost my only son, who was 25 years at the time. And I've talked about some of the adversity I've faced in my work life as well. You will face adversity in your life. You'll go through speed bumps. But when you think about people coming into the workforce, you want those people who are able to face those speed bumps, run over them, have the car bounce and bounce and bounce, but they keep going and keep their foot on the gas and keep pressing forward. When one door closes, they don't say, I'm at a dead end. They say, that door closed so that I can take my maniacal focus off of that door and look around and realize that there are many other doors that are open and many, many ways to achieve. So I think that attitude and resilience is one of the key differentiators in hiring, and it's one of the biggest factors in success and failure in business.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
That is a gift on behalf of the Institute for Leadership Advancement as well as the Terry College of Business. Let us all thank Ms. Debbie Storey for sharing her leadership experience with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Melissa.
But we also want to thank our corporate sponsors and all of you all for attending today. As you go out, please fill out the Who Are You cards, and we will see you next semester at the next Terry Leadership Speaker Series. Thank you.